She didn't remember walking downstairs. That was the part that scared her most, not the knife in her hand, not the darkness pooling at the edges of the kitchen, not even the basement door standing open in front of her like a mouth waiting to be fed. It was the gap, the missing piece between closing her eyes in bed at 11 p.m. and standing here, barefoot on cold tile at 3 in the morning, holding a knife she didn't choose, facing a door she hadn't opened. Claire Mercer stood there for a long time before she moved, before she breathed, before she let herself look down at her own hand like it belonged to someone else. And in a way, it did. This is the part of the story most families never get to tell. Not because they don't survive it. Some of them do. But because the ones who make out can never quite explain what happened inside that house without sounding like they've lost their minds. And after what they've been through, maybe the line between those two things gets harder to find. What I'm about to tell you is the story of the Mercer family. A mother, a father, 2 kids, and a house that had been waiting patiently, quietly, for a very long time, for exactly the right family to walk through its door. It didn't want them dead. That would have been easier. The house was listed at $310,000. In any other market, in any other neighborhood, that number would have made sense, maybe even felt steep. But for a 4-bedroom colonial with original hardwood floors, a wraparound porch, and just under an acre of land 40 minutes outside the city, it was the kind of price that makes a person stop scrolling and read the listing twice. Daniel Mercer read it 4 times. He and Claire had been looking for 8 months. 8 months of overpriced apartments, compromised square footage, and conversations that always circled back to the same quiet tension. They needed more space. They had less money than they used to, and the reasons for both of those things were better left unspoken between them. There had been a business. There had been a loss. There had been a year that neither of them talked about directly anymore. The way you learn not to press on a bruise. The house felt like an answer. Claire drove out to see it on a Tuesday. Daniel had a meeting he couldn't move, so she took the kids. Lily in the back seat with her headphones on, Josh in the passenger seat pretending he wasn't nervous about changing schools again. The drive was longer than the map suggested. The roads got narrower. The trees got closer together. And then the house appeared at the end of a gravel driveway like something out of a photograph. White siding, green shutters. A porch swing still moving slightly in the October wind, even though there was no breeze. Claire thought, this is it. Lily thought something else entirely. She didn't say anything at first. She got out of the car, stood at the edge of the driveway, and looked up at the house with an expression Claire couldn't name. Not fear exactly, more like recognition, like she'd seen it before somewhere she couldn't place. "You okay?" Claire asked, "Can I stay in the car?" Lily said she was 9 years old and had never once asked to stay in the car for anything. Claire told her it would be a quick tour, 20 minutes. Lily came inside but didn't leave the front hallway. The realtor's name was Patrick Sauls. He was friendly in the way people are friendly when they need something to be over. All smiles, minimal eye contact, answers just vague enough to not technically be lies. When Claire asked about the previous owners, he said there had been a few families over the years. Nothing unusual. The last occupants had simply decided to relocate. When she asked how long the house had been sitting empty, he glanced at his clipboard and said, "Not too long." It had been empty for 4 years. She found that out later. Josh found the door on his own. He'd wandered down the upstairs hallway while Claire was asking Patrick about the water heater, and he'd noticed it the way teenagers notice things. Not with alarm, but with a particular boredom-sharpened curiosity of someone who has nothing better to do. It was set into the wall between the linen closet and the master bedroom, painted over. No handle, just a faint rectangular outline of a frame that someone had tried very hard to make invisible. He almost called out to his mom. Then he decided not to. He wasn't sure why. Downstairs, Claire was already calculating square footage in her head, already imagining where the furniture would go, already deciding. In the master bedroom, she noticed the wallpaper. It was a soft cream color with small painted roses, dated but not offensive. She ran her hand along the wall near the window and felt the slight ridge of something underneath. She picked at the corner, without thinking. Peeled back an inch of cream paper to reveal older paper beneath, darker, then peeled back another inch. She stopped, written on the layer beneath in what looked like pencil, in handwriting too careful and too deliberate to be accidental. She never made it out. Claire stood there for a moment. Then she smoothed the top layer of wallpaper back over it, pressed it flat with her palm, and went downstairs to tell Patrick they were very interested. She didn't mention the writing. She told herself it was nothing. Old houses had old stories. People wrote strange things. It didn't mean anything. She told herself that for the next 6 weeks, right up until the sleepwalking started. They moved in on a Saturday in November. The first 2 weeks were fine. Better than fine. The house was warm in the way old houses are warm, with thick walls and heavy doors, and a particular quiet that only comes from being far enough away from everything that the world stops bleeding in through the windows. Daniel put together furniture. Claire unpacked boxes. Josh found a trail through the trees behind the property and ran it every morning before school. Lily slept with her light on, but didn't say why. The third week, Claire started walking in her sleep. The first time, Daniel found her in the kitchen at 2 a.m. standing at the sink, staring out the window at the dark backyard. He touched her shoulder, and she woke up confused and a little embarrassed. They laughed about it over coffee the next morning. Stress response, they said. New house. New rhythms. The second time, she was in the upstairs hallway, standing outside Lily's door, her hand raised like she was about to knock, or like she'd been frozen mid-motion by something she heard on the other side. There was nothing on the other side. Lily was asleep. The third time, Daniel didn't find her in time. He woke at 3 a.m. to an empty bed and went looking. She wasn't in the hallway, wasn't in the kitchen. He found her at the bottom of the basement stairs, standing in the dark, holding a knife from the block on the counter. She was completely still, eyes open but not present, like the body was occupied by something that didn't know how to use it properly. He said her name 7 times before she blinked. When she came back, she didn't remember any of it. Not the stairs, not the dark, not the knife. She sat on the kitchen floor and shook for 20 minutes while Daniel held her and told her it was fine. It was okay. It was probably just stress. But here's what Daniel didn't know yet, what none of them knew. In 1962, a woman named Miriam Crawford lived in that house with her husband, Gerald, and their 3-year-old daughter. Gerald Crawford was not a good man. The records on what happened that November are thin. 1 police report, 1 coroner's note, 2 sentences in the local paper. But the pattern of what Miriam did in her last weeks in that house, the sleepwalking, the kitchen, the basement stairs, was identical to what Claire was doing now. Not similar. Identical. The house wasn't haunted. It was something worse than that. It was precise. Josh heard the voices for the first time on a Wednesday night in December. He was doing homework at his desk with his headphones off, something he almost never did, when he heard them, coming through the wall. A man and a woman, arguing, not loud, but sharp. The specific register of fight that had been going on for a long time and had finally found its true ugly frequency. Then a boy's voice, younger, scared, saying please over and over in a way that made Josh's stomach turn. He pulled out one earbud and pressed his ear to the wall. It stopped. He told himself the neighbors, then remembered there were no neighbors for half a mile. The next night it happened again, and the night after that. And after 2 weeks of this, something shifted in Josh that Claire noticed but couldn't name. He got quieter, then more irritable. Then one evening at dinner, he snapped at Lily over something meaningless with a coldness in his voice that didn't sound like him. Didn't sound like a 14-year-old at all. Actually, sounded older, angrier, cornered. In 1987, a boy named Marcus Aldridge had lived in that house, 14 years old. He had listened to the same arguments through the same wall, had said please in the same way, had gone quiet, then cold, then something else entirely. The house was recasting him, slotting Josh into a role that had already been written. And then there was Lily. Lily had been sleeping with her light on since the first night. She hadn't told anyone why, and no one had pushed. But in the second month, she stopped sleeping in her bed altogether and started appearing in her parents' doorway at 2 a.m., standing there until one of them woke up and brought her in. When Claire finally asked, Lily said it quietly, without drama, the way children say the most terrifying things. There's a baby crying under my bed every night, and I think it's been there for a long time. No one else heard it, not until the night Daniel sat outside Lily's door and waited. And at 2:17 a.m., in the complete silence of a house with no neighbors and no traffic and no noise from anywhere, he heard it too, faint, muffled, the sound of an infant crying from somewhere beneath the floorboards. He didn't sleep again that night. In 2003, a couple had lived in this house for 11 days before leaving everything they owned behind and driving away in the middle of the night. They left the baby monitor on. No one ever recovered the recording. The timelines were bleeding together now. 1962, 1987, 2003, all of it pressing against the present like fingers against glass. The family wasn't living in the house anymore. They were living inside its memory. And the memory was getting stronger. Daniel was not a man who believed in things he couldn't touch. He'd spent his whole adult life in the world of numbers and systems and outcomes. He needed causes that had effects, problems that had solutions, answers that didn't require you to accept something impossible first. So he sat down at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning with his laptop and started searching. He told himself he was just looking for explanations, historical records, previous owners, anything that could be rationalized. What he found could not be rationalized. 3 separate incidents. Same address. Spanning 70 years. 1962, Gerald Crawford, deceased. Cause of death listed as accidental. Wife Miriam institutionalized 6 weeks later. Daughter placed with relatives. File sealed. 1987, Robert Aldridge, deceased. Ruling, undetermined. Wife Eleanor admitted to Grayfield Care Facility, Harmon County, 1 month after the incident. Son Marcus never located. 2003, infant Jane Doe. Cause of death listed as undetermined. Parents' names redacted from every document Daniel could find. Current whereabouts unknown. 3 families. 3 incidents. 1 survivor from each. All institutionalized. All described in the records using the same language. Unresponsive. Dissociative. Unable to distinguish present from past. Daniel closed his laptop and sat in the kitchen for a long time. Then he drove to Grayfield Care Facility. Eleanor Aldridge was 63 years old and looked 20 years older than that. She was sitting in a chair by the window when the staff showed Daniel in, and she looked up at him with the calm of someone who had been waiting a long time for a visit like this. Not surprised, not afraid, just tired in the way people get tired when they've been carrying something no one else believes in for decades. He told her the address. She nodded before he finished the sentence. He asked her what it was, what the house was. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "It's not a haunting. Ghosts want something from you. This is different. The house absorbs what happens inside it. The terror, the violence, the love, all of it. And it replays, like a recording that needs new equipment to run. That's what your family is. Equipment." Daniel asked her how to stop it. She looked at him for a long time before answering. "There's a room," she said. "One that isn't on the floor plan. You've seen it." He had. The painted-over door in the upstairs hallway. The one Josh had found on the first visit and never mentioned. "That's where it started," Eleanor said. 1931. Original owner. He found something, did something, in that room that we don't have a clean word for. And everything since has been a house finishing what he started. Every family resets the loop. Yours is just the latest rehearsal. Daniel asked what happened to the families who didn't get out. Eleanor looked back out the window. "They finished the loop," she said quietly, "and then they're part of the recording." He was already standing to leave when she said one more thing. "Your wife is further along than you know. If she finishes the Crawford replay, if she reaches the end of Miriam's loop, she won't come back as herself. Whatever comes back will remember being Claire, but it won't be her." He drove home, doing 90 miles an hour. He was 40 minutes away when his phone rang. "Josh," voice cracked and barely holding. "Dad, something's wrong with Mom." He could hear Lily in the background, crying, and under that, nothing. Silence where Claire's voice should have been. Daniel told Josh to get Lily and lock themselves in Josh's room, to not open the door for anyone. Josh asked why. Daniel said just do it, and hung up and pushed the car to 100. He found the front door unlocked. The house was dark except for the light above the stove, casting everything in that low amber glow that makes familiar rooms feel wrong. He moved through the kitchen into the hallway and stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Claire was on the fourth step from the top, standing, facing Lily's door, the knife from the counter in her hand. She wasn't moving, wasn't breathing in any rhythm he recognized. She wasn't Claire. Whatever was standing on those stairs was wearing Claire's body and moving through 1962, like it was the only year that had ever existed. Daniel climbed the stairs slowly. He didn't grab for the knife, didn't shout. He got close enough to see her face, eyes open, jaw tight, looking at something that wasn't there. And he started talking, not about the house, not about what was happening. He talked about the day they met. He talked about a restaurant they'd eaten at on their first date, where the waiter had spilled an entire carafe of water into Daniel's lap, and Claire had laughed so hard she'd knocked her own glass over too, and they'd both been soaked, and they'd both been happy. He talked about the morning Lily was born, and how Claire had been the calmest person in the room, and had held their daughter for the first time with a steadiness that had made Daniel fall in love with her all over again. He talked about things only the two of them knew. Small things. Specific things. The kind of details that can't be replayed because they were never stored anywhere except between two people. Claire blinked. Once. Twice. The knife dropped from her hand and clattered down the stairs. She looked at Daniel like she was surfacing from underwater. Panicked. Gasping. Not quite sure which direction was up. He caught her before she fell and held her on the stairs while she shook, and he told her, "You're here. You're back. I've got you," over and over until she stopped trembling. Then Lily's voice from behind the door. "Daddy." Josh won't wake up. Josh was on the floor of his room in the corner, knees pulled his chest, eyes open and fixed on nothing. His breathing was shallow. His skin was cold. He didn't respond to his name, to touch, to light. He was there in body and somewhere else entirely in every way that mattered. Eleanor's voice in Daniel's head. Anyone still inside when the replay completes doesn't come back as themselves. Daniel knelt in front of his son and did the only thing he could think to do. He picked up Josh's hand, and he started talking. Not about the house. Not about Marcus Aldridge or 1987, or what had been done to that boy inside these walls. He talked about Josh. He talked about a 6-year-old who used to insist on wearing his shoes on the wrong feet because he thought it was funny. He talked about a 10-year-old who'd stayed up until midnight to watch a meteor shower from the backyard and fallen asleep in a lawn chair and woken up covered in dew. He talked about a 14-year-old who was still, underneath all the walls he'd built around himself in the last year, one of the most quietly kind people Daniel had ever known. He talked until his voice was raw. And then Josh blinked, frowned, looked at his father with eyes that were his own again. "Dad," he said, "I had the worst dream. They left before sunrise. 4 bags. 2 cars. They didn't go back for anything else." The Mercer family moved into a rental apartment in the city that January. Claire started therapy. Josh started running again. Trails, not roads. Lily slept with her light on for another 8 months. And then one night she just didn't, and no one made a thing of it. They never talked about the house directly, not as a family. Some things don't get processed out loud. Some things just become the before and after line in the story of who you are. The house was condemned in February, not for structural reasons. The inspector's report listed the cause simply as uninhabitable, which isn't a structural cause, and isn't a legal one, and raises far more questions than it answers. The condemnation order was lifted 14 months later after a review board found no specific code violations. In April of that year, a new listing appeared at the address. 4 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, wraparound porch, just under an acre, 40 minutes outside the city, $310,000. The photos were the same. The house doesn't need to chase anyone. It just needs to wait.